piano teacher friends. Welcome to episode 137 of the Beyond Measure podcast. This is me, Christina Whitlock, your producer, host, and most importantly, anytime piano teacher friend. I'm here to help remind you that no one is alone in this studio teaching profession. I want to welcome any new listeners to the podcast today and to give a special shout out to any of my new friends that I picked up at NCKP last week. Oh my goodness, what a time. I just loved every second of that conference, friends. I met so many of you. We learned alongside each other. We laughed and we cried and we thought and, the whole thing. So if you want to hear more of my thoughts on NCKP 2023, my conference travel buddy and roommate, Amy Chaplin, will be releasing a conversation on her Piano Pantry podcast on Tuesday of this week. So be sure to listen in for that if you're curious about our experience. Today is the 9th and final stop on our summer bookshelf tour over here. I have spent the last months, June and July, sharing with you some of my very favorite music teacher reading material. And it has been so fun to hear your thoughts. I hope that I have given you a push to do at least a little more reading related to the teaching profession, because there are so many terrific authors out there writing game-changing content for us. And speaking of game-changing, today we are taking a look at a piano teacher classic, Questions and Answers by Frances Clark. Queen Frances, as I call her. How I would love to sit down and have a chat with Frances Clark. Okay, anyway, let's dive in. In case you are not familiar, Frances Clark was this absolute trailblazer in the world of 20th century piano pedagogy. Among many other things, she used to write a monthly column in Clavier magazine that was titled Questions and Answers. The book, Questions and Answers, is a compilation of 26 years of those responses that she wrote for Clavier. And even though a lot has changed in the world since Frances Clark was revolutionizing the piano teaching world, this book is a testament to the fact that some things just never change. It's incredible how timeless these questions and her responses are. Like I'm always saying, there really is nothing new under the sun, and this book completely proves my case, which is actually going to earn the place of my first takeaway today. As citizens of this wild 21st century life, we can't help but feel like our struggles are unique. And I mentioned in last week's episode that there are new challenges we face, but how easy is it to dismiss previous generations because we just think that our experiences must be so much more different than theirs were? Just flip through this book and you will notice topics that teachers are still discussing all the time today. Things like how to explain to parents the value of paying for a 45-minute lesson rather than 30 minutes. What to do with overly scheduled students. There's this great question from 1984, mind you, asking if students are just not progressing as quickly as they were 30 years ago. I laugh because I know teachers ask the same exact thing today. Frances Clark talks about memorization so diplomatically. She talks about disruptive students and about recording yourself teaching and holding special group classes in August. And these are all things that I recommend. Having completely forgotten that Frances Clark was doing all of these things first. Now, of course, there is some dated content in this book, specifically dealing with cassette tapes and interesting thoughts on these newfangled Casio keyboards. But really, friends, we must be careful not to dismiss the experiences of those who have gone before us. This, of course, encompasses a lot more than just music teacher world, but we do ourselves such a disservice when we discredit the sage advice of our elders. This is the reason that I feel so strongly about making sure that you have a mentor in your work and that you yourself are actively mentoring someone else as well. We all have experiences that are valid and can be used to help others better understand our work. I talk more about that in episode number 80, which is titled Cheers to Mentoring Relationships, if you're interested in hearing more. Okay, here's the second takeaway from Frances Clark's questions and answers: the full scope of our work. I think there's a lot to be learned about the depth of music teaching just by reading through the table of contents for this book. I mean, seriously, let me give you a rundown. Chapter 1 deals with thoughts and attitudes about teaching. That's kind of my sweet spot, right? The topics dealt with in Chapter 1 include like how to determine if you are indeed a successful teacher, what to do with students who cry, plateaus in learning, motivation, and so many more good things. Chapter 2 deals with topics related to lesson plans and assignments, like really practical stuff. Chapter 3 is focused on what they deem fundamental subjects, like reading and rhythm and fingering, ear training, etc. Chapter 4 deals with, quote, basic skills, like position at the piano, scales, memorizing, phrasing, practicing, on and on that list goes. Chapter 5 deals with teaching methods, like group versus private, repertoire classics, recitals, festivals, that kind of stuff. Chapter 6 is focused on types of students, like transfer students, adult students, early childhood, pedagogy programs. Chapter 7 is this extensive resource for teaching specific repertoire. Chapter 8 deals with books and reference works, and Chapter 9 deals with the business of teaching. Whew, I mean, right? Like when you sit down and you look at all those topics, each feeling just as important as the next, it helps justify why we can sometimes feel overwhelmed in our work. Because we deal with a lot of things, friends. But again, connecting with other teachers, even if it's just connecting with Frances Clark through her past writing, like this is such an important step in affirming and supporting your work. You know, I read Stephen King's memoir titled On Writing this past January, and he talks at length about how writing is a form of time travel. I laughed out loud at first, but he's really serious about it, and I am now on board. He points out that as he sits and writes in his office, that he is truly writing to future readers, including those who will walk this earth long after he's gone. That's really beautiful, right? And it makes me realize what a gift this collection of responses from Frances Clark is to us still today. Like, how fantastic is it that I have been able to read and learn from her even though I was a teenager when she left this earth. And really, podcasting is the same way. We have yet to truly know what is going to happen to all of these podcast episodes 100 years from now, right? Like, will anyone be listening to this then? I don't know, but it is fun to think about. Anyway, in today's case, I am so glad that Frances Clark is a time traveling writer. Ha, sorry guys, I got started on a little legacy related tangent, didn't I? It's not an episode of Beyond Measure if I don't talk about legacy in one way, shape, or form, right? It's kind of my favorite thing. I just can't help it. Anyway, let's get to takeaway number 3 from Frances Clark's questions and answers. I'm going to say that we should give our students credit. One of the things that I love about Frances Clark was her understanding of the human sitting across from her. You hear me say that a lot on this podcast, I know. But for instance, when the subject of teaching the pedal comes up, she points out that, quote, I am sure that every young student who has a piano in his home has experimented with the pedal. Our job, then, is to refine the experiment, end quote. Isn't that so true? Like, how often do we as teachers approach the pedal as though it's something brand new? When, in fact, if our student has a piano at home with a pedal, we all know that they have already tried it. And our job, as Frances Clark says, is to refine their experimentation. I just love that because so much of what we do is refining things that our students have already been experimenting with. This is just one example of Frances Clark's understanding of the student's mind. And here's another. When talking about that ever popular debate of playing from memory, the question is raised, do you ask a student to play from memory if they say they don't feel confident? Now, some of you are very adamant about your stance on playing from memory, but don't shut down here just because you have strong feelings on either direction, okay? Pay attention to the consideration that she gives here. Frances Clark responds by saying, quote, whenever a student says he lacks confidence, we have to ask ourselves, is he saying this because it's the popular thing to say? Is he saying it because he is caught up in his parents' anxiety over the occasion? Or is his memory really as insecure as he says it is? Our job is to make sure he really knows the music, and if he has to play it from memory, that he really knows it from memory. End quote. And she goes on to describe some very detailed, very helpful memory tests. When all is said and done, what Frances demonstrates here is this, that we need to seek to understand why our students hold the beliefs about their playing that they do. And we should make sure that they are prepared to do what they need to do for any events that we are helping them prepare for. I mean, that's the job, right? Helping our students see the truth about themselves and making sure that we are setting them up for success. It's these messages reiterated time and time again through this collection of advice columns that forever endears me to the work of Frances Clark. Not to mention, of course, the fact that I am just returning home from the National Conference on Keyboard Pedagogy, which is an incredible conference put on by Piano Inspires, which is formerly known as the Frances Clark Center. Again, with the legacy business here, right? Like without the legacy left by the incredible music educators of our past, life would be so very different for us. Don't you agree? Let's give a toast to legacy today. Studio Studio Music teacher friends from all around the world. Today, we are giving thanks for those who have gone before us. The teachers who have taught the teachers who taught our teachers who taught us. And on the cycle goes. Careful now, or I'm likely to start singing the circle of life. Truly, I hope you will make an effort to seek out wisdom of those who have been in this profession longer than you. They won't have all the answers, and you likely won't agree on everything, but they have something to teach you. They absolutely do. Cheers to our legacies, my friends, the ones that we have benefited from and the ones that we leave. Hear, hear. Okay, friends, that will do it for episode 137 of the Beyond Measure podcast. I want you to know that my 6-week summer session of the Studio Foundations course was a smashing success. So we are going to run the 6-week format again beginning in September. Yes! So if you are curious to dig into the legacy that I care about leaving this profession, please check out ChristinaWhitlock.com/foundations, where you will learn information about the Studio Foundations course. It's 14 principles that I keep front and center in my teaching to make sure that I feel great about what I do, while also making sure that my students and their parents are also feeling great about what I do. Happy teachers, happy students, happy families. That's the trifecta, my friends. And you will learn how I do it in the 6-week Studio Foundations course. $129 is a pretty reasonable investment in a satisfying career, don't you think? One of my summer course participants wrote recently and made the comment, "Whatever you said in the course always seemed to be exactly what I needed to hear." And I loved that. What a lovely compliment, right? I'd love to spend more time with you through the Studio Foundations course, so if it is something you're thinking about, this is your heads up that we are starting another round in September, okay? Okay. Until next time, onward and upward toward building those legacies. Be well, my friends.